Welcome everybody to the Office of Undergraduate Research Education Series. Today's presentation is Demystifying Graduate School, and Tips to Conquering Imposter Syndrome. And our speaker today is Dr. Tiffany Baffour. Today's virtual event is being recorded, and we ask that you mute yourself for the best experience. If you have questions, please use the chat feature, or you can unmute when invited by the speaker. And we ask everyone to complete an event evaluation. I will put the link in the chat feature, and we especially want the Europe scholars to complete that so they can get credit for attending this event. And at the Office of Undergraduate Research, our mission is to facilitate and promote undergraduate, student, faculty, collaborative research, and creative works in all disciplines throughout the University of Utah campus. In recognition that excellence requires diversity, we pursue this mission through equitable programming that promotes diverse representation and social justice. We acknowledge that this land, which is named for the Ute tribe, is the traditional ancestral homeland of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshute, and Ute tribes. The University of Utah recognizes and respects the enduring relationship that exists between many indigenous peoples and their traditional homelands. We respect the sovereign relationship between tribes, states, and the federal government, and we affirm the University of Utah's commitment to a partnership with Native nations and urban Indian communities through research, education, and community outreach activities. And our speaker today is Dr. Tiffany Baffour. She is an associate professor in the College of Social Work and also an associate dean for graduate equity, diversity, and inclusion at the Graduate School for University of Utah. So now I'll turn it over to you, Tiffany.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm really excited to meet all of you all, and I'm hoping that this will really be a helpful and interactive presentation. I've partnered a lot with the Office of Undergraduate Research as a SPUR mentor. My own son, who is actually a student here at the university, has participated in a lot of the activities sponsored by the Office of Undergraduate Research. And as we know, really participating in undergraduate research is one of the most impactful practices that undergraduate students can participate throughout their research career. So happy to support that, and also happy to talk about next steps in terms of graduate school and how to prepare for that process. So again, want to make this really interactive and fun and an interesting and insightful presentation for you today. So the goals of the session for today are really to outline processes and resources to search for graduate programs and other research opportunities. So we want to kind of think about that preparation in the context of what things do we want to be prepared for on the onset or before we begin that application process, and sort of postgraduate, what are some of the opportunities that might be helpful to look at in terms of, again, preparing for graduate school. I'm gonna also, I was asked to talk a little bit about imposter syndrome. So I'm going to define for you what is imposter syndrome within an institutional context, particularly higher ed, and then what are some strategies that we can think of to really overcome that for those who are experiencing that. Identity, we want to really talk about identifying self-care opportunities and other ways to enjoy the transition to graduate school, or for those who are working and then planning to go to graduate school later. I think one of the things is we often experience a lot of angst in sort of transitions and life transitions. So how do we really kind of think about like enjoyment and enjoying the moment in which we're in, and really how that transition can really be insightful and fun, etc. So if we can move to the next slide, please. So these are some pre-submitted questions from participants that I'm going to try to address within the context of the presentation today. A lot of folks just asked about advice or methods for, essentially looking at PhD programs. How do you search out potential advisors? How do we go at interacting with those advisors in terms of how do you reach out to them? What are the best ways to do that? So I'll talk about that. How do you select graduate school? What are some of the differences in applications? I will spend quite a bit of time on that. What are some of the recommendations that I may have, particularly for students from underrepresented backgrounds who are preparing for graduate school? I will address that as well today. And again, kind of just talking about what is imposter syndrome. And this is a great question also, differences between master's and PhD programs, and then how to maintain that work-life balance. And again, that emphasis on self-care and requirements for graduate school. So I'll try to throw all of that into the mix today within this presentation as well. So we're going to just start with this idea of where do we begin this process? Where do we start? So in my opinion, I think the best place to start with thinking about graduate school is developing what I'm calling SMART goals. So essentially just doing some simple goal setting for yourself. What are some specific but clearly defined objectives that you may have in this process? So instead of saying hey, I want to go to grad school, you want to be really specific in your goals. I want to enroll in a PhD program in sociology by, fall 2024, fall 2025. So then that really gives you time to kind of think about what are the measurable pieces that you need to achieve that goal. So for example, if that was your goal, you want to spend at least probably 6 months to a year before you plan to enroll, just researching PhD programs. And if you were thinking about hey, I'm really open to going across the country, I want to learn about what these different programs in my field have to offer. Maybe you might want to just set aside an hour a week and say, hey, I'm going to spend an hour a week researching 3 PhD programs. And then every month I'm going to attend 2 information sessions. And then I'm going to send 1 email a week or a month and connect with 1 person after these information sessions for the programs that I'm interested. So again, these will be very specific to your own goals, but these are just some examples. Make sure that the goals that you set are achievable. One of the things that I do know is that you all are just really super, super busy. Many students are taking a full course load, working, there's just a lot of things going on. You have a lot of responsibilities. So it's really important not to overwhelm yourself and to really emphasize, your own self-care and care in your journey. So for example, researching, 20 programs a night is not a realistic goal. So thinking about how much time do I have in the context of everything else that I'm doing in my life, and then setting achievable goals that you can meet, and then celebrating those goals is really super important as well. making sure that these micro goals are aligned with that bigger goal of I want to enroll in a PhD program by X date. And ensuring that it's time bound, and again, celebrating the little steps and accomplishments you have along the journey. So for example, if you get all your applications done, make sure you celebrate that. That's a really, really big deal. Don't worry so much about the outcome, but just celebrate sort of each stage in that process. So any questions before we move on? Any questions? So one of the things I want to also go back to, one of the questions about differences between master's and PhD programs, I would definitely check in with your mentors and your professors, because it really just varies really, really widely according to your field of whether or not it's even necessary to pursue a master's if you're planning on getting a PhD. So for example, my field, as was mentioned in the beginning, is social work. So the general rule of thumb is that for social work, you need to have a master's degree in social work because it's considered the terminal degree for practice. So a lot of PhD programs actually do require that students have the master's as a criteria for entrance into the PhD program. But again, that varies super widely depending upon your field. So you do want to kind of check in with your professors and mentors as you're preparing for this process. My suggestion is apply to as many programs as is realistic for you. So for example, if you know you have flexibility to go anywhere all around the country, like really think about, well, I like the outdoors, so California is going to be awesome for me. Or I really like warm weather places, and I've always wanted to live in Florida. Like whatever your heart's desire, like think through that really carefully, and what not only fits your academic interests, but your interests in terms of location, etc. Also, an important thing is, even if it's the same discipline, the commonality between programs and requirements is just not there. You'll just see a tremendous amount of variability in terms of requirements. Some programs and disciplines use this program called Grad, and I have a link here. This presentation will be available on the website afterwards. So all of the links and resources here you can come back to. So this GradCast does have a variety of different programs, but say, for example, if your discipline is chemistry, they may have a few chemistry programs, but not all chemistry programs. And so that's something to kind of like think about as you're applying for this program. There is no common app. So you may remember when most of you applied to undergraduate, there's a common application. There is no common app for graduate school. So it will take a lot of time and resources on your behalf to kind of research the criteria and the deadlines. I have a nephew and we're really close, and he just got into dental school last year. And one of the recommendations that I made to him was develop a spreadsheet of all the places you're interested in, all the deadlines and all the criteria. And he did that. And he said it was very, very helpful in terms of helping him stay organized throughout the process. Consider what you need to do to be competitive for this process. Again, going back to those conversations with mentors and professors in your field. Undergraduate research experience, I will widely say that that is a helpful experience, probably no matter what your discipline is, saying that you had an undergraduate research experience, that you worked with a mentor in a lab or you had some very specific research experience is incredibly helpful in a grad process, because what folks are really looking for as they're evaluating whether or not you're a good fit is, are you prepared for the graduate process? So obviously GPA is one factor, but participation in previous research experiences, internships, work experiences, volunteer experiences are all relevant things. So another thing that I would really highly suggest is reaching out to potential advisors or mentors at other universities that you're applying to. The advice that I have with this is ensure that you are really kind of crafting a very formal and professional email. So sometimes I get emails from students from all over the world wanting to work with me. And, you know, if it starts off with, hey, H-E-Y, you know, hey, comma, my name is not up there. Like, I can tell that they haven't done research about my articles in my area of expertise, then my thoughts are that this is probably not someone that I want to work with. So when I see that somebody has addressed me, you know, good afternoon, Dr. Baffour, dear Dr. Baffour, they've clearly spent time understanding what my research agenda is about. And they're very clear about how their interests and expertise kind of fit in with mine, then I feel really excited about meeting with that person and then exploring that relationship more. So one of the things you really have to think about is folks' time is really, really precious. So when you're sending this email, you really want this to be concise and you want to be clear about what your needs are and what you're asking them to do. So if you're asking them, hey, can I set up a 30-minute meeting with you to discuss, you know, my potential, you know, or potentially working with you, or I'm really interested in the doctoral program at X university. And, you know, I think you could potentially be a great fit for me as a mentor. Could I have 30 minutes of your time to meet with you to discuss this more, something of that nature, I think would just be super, super helpful. So any questions here about that? I saw a couple things pop up in the chat.
We just had somebody said, great advice. I would only add that students use their advising teams and faculty mentors about which programs to consider. Searching through all the possible programs can be a waste of a lot of time.
Yes, so as you'll see, the first point, and I've kind of talked about this in great depth, is you want to really start with talking with your mentors and your professors here at the university before you kind of delve into you know, this whole research process. But I would kind of also strongly urge you to kind of do some of your own research, because as faculty members, we all have our different perspectives and expertise. So there may be some other things that you may be interested in that they could possibly be unaware of as well. But again, the most important starting place would be talking with those mentors and professors. Thank you. Great point.
And he also said to have your mentors reach out to other mentors on your behalf.
Yes, that's a nice idea as well.
We have a question. What would be a good way to start building mentor relationships? As a U online student, that hasn't been something we have a lot of tools to facilitate.
That is a fantastic program. A fantastic idea. And I would definitely try to reach out to some of your professors, and then also within your major, kind of go to the website and then see where are the professors that are in your area of interest, and consider like reaching out to them to do an independent study. Students who are distance students can also work with UROC. You can have an independent project or work with a faculty member even from a distance. It doesn't have to be a person who's face-to-face. I actually, my graduate assistant is a distance student. I think I've seen her one time this entire year in person. So we do everything via Zoom or via email, and it can still be a really rewarding partnership, and you can actually do a lot of research creatively through a distance. So fantastic question. Thank you.
That's all we have right now.
Okay, awesome. Keep it coming, everybody. So one of the things I wanted to kind of just touch upon really briefly is resources for summer undergraduate research. I've kind of already given several shameless commercials for the Office of Undergraduate Research. The SPUR program, the summer program for undergraduate research, is absolutely amazing. If you've had the opportunity, or if you're, say, a sophomore or junior, that's something you may want to think about for next year. And then I also have some links here to some other national programs. I have several links to some STEM programs, and then also some other programs that are available here at the U. So we have a number of summer undergraduate research opportunities. So again, this will be available to you on the website, and you can kind of go through and search these. And I hope this will be a really super helpful resource for you. So here's a really, I think, important thing that is one of the most important questions that I get as an associate dean here in the graduate school is what funding opportunities are available. So one very, very important tip that I can provide is if you've applied to graduate school and you've gotten accepted, just pay really, really close attention to the award letter. Sometimes award letters will indicate that there are multiple years of funding, and sometimes they will just say you've received funding for the 24-25 academic year. You really want to talk with the faculty advisor or program director to find out if it's a 4-year program, what is the plan ongoing, and how will you be funded through the duration of the program. So that's really, really critical, because sometimes people see a letter and they just make an assumption that this is going to fund the entire journey, and it may or it may not. So understanding that award letter and having conversations is really, really critical. Next slide. So these are a couple of really great resources here in the graduate school. If you're planning to attend the University of Utah, we have my office awards what we call an Emerging Diversity Scholarship and a Ronald E. McNair Graduate Fellowship. These are two separate fellowships. The Emerging Diversity is actually for second-year graduate students, while Ronald McNair is for incoming students who have been a part of the Ronald McNair program as undergraduates. The graduate school also offers several really fantastic fellowships. You can search these either through the link below or go to the graduate school webpage. There are university teaching assistantships. There's the Mariner Eccles Graduate Fellowship, Stephenson Cannon, and there's a fantastic Graduate Research Fellowship as well. So one of the great things about these fellowships is they not only provide financial support, but then they also give you an opportunity to, kind of add something important to your resume to say that you've received these prestigious fellowships. Next slide. So another great resource that we have here at the U is called Pivot. It's Pivot. So you can actually access Pivot through the library database and then search for different fellowships and graduate assistantships that are at the national level. So one of the things that Pivot allows you to do is to kind of delve down into your specific area or discipline. So you can see here, this fellowship here for medical students. There's different information here, graduate research fellowships, etc. So this is a phenomenal resource, and I've actually had the library come and do some presentations for us over the course of several semesters here in the graduate school for graduate students as well. Thank you. I remembered to cut my phone off, but I forgot to cut my watch off. So I apologize for the noise. Another great resource, this is the Graduate School Diversity Office, which is the office that I'm in charge of here in the graduate school. Lots of great resources that we have there on our website. Some of them are geared more specifically to students of color, and some are more general. I would really highly recommend that if you're interested in pursuing graduate school here at the U, you look at this academic works database, and many of you are probably already familiar with that. It holds a plethora of different resources in terms of scholarships that are available here at the U for both undergraduate and graduate students. So great resource to kind of just check in with regularly to see what is out there and what you might be eligible for. These are just a list of some of the other things that we have. And as you can see, we have a list here. This is open to all graduate students. And there are some specific student fellowships around STEM, et cetera.
We have a question.
Sure.
Asking if Pivot is available to alumni.
I think probably not. You would need to unless you have a UID that's current, you may not be able to access that.
Second question, are these scholarships available for students in graduate school who are not necessarily following a research path? The Professional Master of Science and Technology is a program that prepares for jobs in the industry, but not in research.
So that's a really fantastic question, and it varies widely by the specific program itself. So if you go to the graduate school website, some of the fellowships will be limited to just PhD programs, and some of them are more open. So again, you kind of just have to look at the requirements, and then if it's not really as clear, you can always email the contact person and say hey, I'm majoring in this. Is this allowable degree? We get questions like that all the time. But again, that academic works database is another fantastic resource. And many times those scholarships are very specific about what programs or degrees are eligible, or if it's limited to just certain kinds of degrees or programs. And any other questions?
There are none in the chat right now.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on. So I'm gonna just take a moment, and I wanted to also mention, if you wanna have your camera on or you wanna turn it off at whatever you're comfortable with. I really enjoy seeing people. It kind of just helps me as I'm moving along to see folks and reactions as well. So I just wanted to really just check in and just ask, are folks feeling overwhelmed with the process of preparing for graduate school? And have you felt like you've experienced imposter syndrome, and how did it take place, and how can you sort of use it to rewrite your own story. So just jump in, anybody with any of those questions you want to respond to. We'll give a moment. Does anybody want to comment about just how this process feels preparing for graduate school?
One person commented that they're a little overwhelmed, especially with learning that each program has different requirements.
Okay.
So, Dr. Baffour, I'm preparing for graduate school by attending this lecture. That is my first step. My name is
Awesome.
Molly, by the way.
Thanks, Molly. Okay, and one person said isolating, hard to feel like there's support. Okay. Finding the right fit is difficult. It's a big commitment to get wrong. Awesome. Okay, thanks. Matthew?
I was just gonna say, I think, in terms of getting food, I'm an undergraduate Europe grant and working in research lab, but it still feels kind of overwhelming because there's a lot of terminology that it just feels like you're expected to know right off the bat. And the differences between funding and fellowships and, scholarships, and TIs versus faculty advisors. There's just a lot of terms to keep straight that you just kind of have to learn all at once on the fly, and it's a bit difficult.
Okay, thank you. That's super helpful. And I'll try to clarify that as well. So Matthew brought up an excellent point and saying that it feels a little overwhelming, just kind of getting used to all the terminology in terms of scholarships, fellowships, and understanding the differences. Scholarships is generally money that you get where there's no commitment. In some cases, a fellowship has a requirement like a commitment in terms of like work or a commitment in working with a faculty member or doing some kind of research. But most definitely, if you're committing to doing a graduate assistantship or a teaching assistantship, then you're generally getting what we call a tuition benefit, where your tuition gets waived or part of the tuition gets waived in exchange for you committing to working a specific number of hours a week with a faculty, generally with a faculty member, either doing teaching or research. So if you're doing that TA or research assistantship, it's also important to understand what the terms of those requirements are. For example, how many hours you're expected to commit, and really kind of meeting with that faculty member and getting an understanding of what their expectations are. So for example, with my students, I have 3 doctoral students who work with me on my research team. And I try to make it super flexible for them because I really want this to be a learning experience that co-occurs with their education. And I don't want what we're doing to kind of supersede the time and commitment they have with their coursework. So I try to keep everything that we're doing like super flexible, where I give them assignments and then they can sort of manage their own time around when they turn it in. And then they kind of like have deadlines of when they do stuff. And then if things come up for them, then we are just very communicative about that. But again, different folks have different styles and ways of working. So that's really, really critical to kind of understand those commitments as well. Thank you, Matthew. Any other questions?
One person said that they think imposter syndrome affects them because they didn't consider graduate school until late in their undergraduate career.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Baffour. I would like to share with all the people that is here my own experience. So I am from Guatemala. I came to Utah 7 years ago, and after coming, starting from scratch, searching for jobs, nothing was coming up. So I thought I already had a master's, but thinking of going back to have another master to be able to get into the job market was challenging, especially because this other master was 20 years after my first master. So feeling old, feeling in a different culture, and also studying in a language that was not my first language was challenging, and was really a challenge to get to do it, but I did it. I went back to school, and it was kind of rewarding to feel that I was as smart as everybody else there, or even smarter, because I had all the experience of life, and all the people there could be my kids, my own sons and daughters, and they even told me like, oh, you're like the mom of the class. But it was a rewarding experience to go to school, to be able to do it, to know that it was in a different language than my main one, and to know that you can do it, and it's just a matter of daring, and once you're there, you just do it. You just do it. So it is complicated, especially if you are a foreigner, but I encourage you to dare, because it is also a very rewarding experience.
Thank you, Alexandra. That was such a great point, and I think really just added you know, a lot of depth to our presentation, with understanding that different folks are bringing different experiences to this process. I think I would argue that it really strengthens our own understanding, and really the classroom environment, when we're able to have a lot of different diverse perspectives in the class. So we're really glad you're here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Shelley, did we have any other comments or questions?
No, I think we're good
Okay.
right now.
Thank you, Shelley. You're really helping me out here. Appreciate you. So defining imposter syndrome, I just kind of wanted, we throw that term around a lot, like, oh, I feel like I have imposter syndrome. And I think it's really important to kind of at least kind of go to the literature and understand the origins and where it actually comes from. So at its root, it's really talks about the inability to accurately self-assess with regard to performance, right? Diminished self-confidence and self-efficacy. Imposter syndrome is an internal sense of intellectual fraudulence and a tendency to attribute success to external factors, right? Like, oh, I was just lucky that I got here, or I got chosen for this reason, and not to really think about you getting chosen or having something great happen to you as attributed to your own intelligence or your own ability. So one of the things, particularly when you look at the literature around imposter syndrome, it does talk very specifically about women and people of color, and that there are really sort of systemic racism and systemic sexism that really create these barriers around success for different kinds of groups. So it's very, very important to kind of understand that those dynamics really take place. And I'm going to tell you, as everyone can see, I do identify as a Black woman. I never feel like an imposter in any situation, because I do feel very confident about my qualifications and my ability to do my job well. Other people may not feel that way, but I really feel like that's not internal to me. That has to do with them and systemic factors that can kind of add to lack of success and sense of belonging for BIPOC folks or women or LGBTQ populations, other folks when we look at intersectionality and marginalized identities. We really do have to have an understanding of how these things may in fact impact the internal sense of fraudulence or us feeling not good about ourselves or our own abilities to be successful in academia. Next slide. So I really like this slide because it kind of defines different types of imposter syndrome. And I was showing this, I have a teenage daughter and I was showing her this yesterday and she's like, Mom, this is me, I'm the superhero. And it's so funny that when you look at this, it's really probably easy for all of us to at least partially identify with one of these kinds of, I guess, types of imposter syndrome: the perfectionist, the superhero, the expert, the natural genius, the soloist. And I think what all of these different types really have in common is that this idea of imposter syndrome is really sort of an internal driver. And even though some folks may feel this internal sense of fraudulence, on the outside, they're just driving themselves really hard to be able to succeed, but inside they're feeling that something is not right. So next slide, and I'm gonna I've addressed this just a little bit, but I think this slide is kind of just right on point. Again, that like navigating imposter syndrome among BIPOC can be especially difficult because folks are really grappling with both internal and external societal messages about ability. And again, this can be appropriate to women in some cases and folks of other marginalized identities. Next slide. So one of the things I think is been really helpful about my own background, I am trained as a social worker. I worked as a therapist for a number of years. And so when I did a lot of assessments and provided like mental health therapy, and whenever I work with folks, I always thought about and got really challenged them to think about what is normal and then what is not normal. So for example, we've just gone through this huge pandemic. I think it's relatively normal to experience after that period of isolation, like feelings of depression, anxiety, like folks are facing these things on a worldwide scale. So when we say, oh, when we're having these feelings, sometimes we feel like, oh, this isn't normal. And I think it's normal for all of us sometimes to feel these internal feelings of inadequacy. I don't think anyone feels like 100% of the time, like I've just got this all together. I don't think anybody feels like that all the time. And if you do, then please just let us know, because we definitely need to find out what you're doing. But it's normal to feel inadequate at times, or to feel like you're falling short, or that you're struggling, or that things are out of balance. And this is going to happen like over our life course, that there are times when things feel better for us, and then there are going to be times where we just feel like things aren't going exactly as planned or as we'd like them to. And I feel like imposter syndrome is all a part that we do sometimes feel like we fall short, and that is actually very, very normal. So any comments about that or questions?
There are not any in the chat right now.
Okay, awesome. We'll move on. So again, I kind of want to go back to this idea about folks with marginalized identities. And sometimes we see a lack of representation of folks of color, particularly in positions of power. So we really have to think about how that really impacts people's sense of self-efficacy. And if you don't see other folks around you that are doing like the thing you want to do, then sometimes that can also feel discouraging. And it also feels challenging, I think, again, with this idea of like not only maybe the internalized sense of feeling like an imposter, but then sometimes that is also external to the environments that are going on. So for folks of color, but also for non-folks of color who are on this call, you know, how to really be an ally in situations and think about that, because individuals do experience a lot of microaggressions. Even here at the university, individuals are experiencing microaggressions every day in various different environments. So we kind of have to promote awareness of that, and then to think about ways that we can address that so that this is a more equitable and welcoming environment for all people. Next slide. So going back to this idea of imposter syndrome, and again, I think when we really review this idea of what is imposter syndrome and how do we address it, I'm going back to my clinical training, which is, you know, cognitive behavioral therapy kind of always tells us to address this idea of negative self-talk. So if you're saying to yourself, oh, I want to apply for grad school, but I just can't do it. I just don't think I'm qualified enough, or I'm just not valuable, I'm not ready, then really think about, are those things really true? And then how do you get support and mentorship to ensure that you're able to take ownership of your own success and what you're good at? And then there are things we're all bad at, trust me. There are lots of things all of us are bad at, and we have to figure out a way to like lean into those weaknesses and not to be afraid to really self-evaluate and to take feedback as well. Finding community in the places that you feel valued is really critical for all of us. So I'm really hopeful that all of you have places here at the U where you feel valued, and communities and spaces where you feel really comfortable to be yourselves and that really help you grow, not only in your academic abilities, but also in your personal relationships. And then also, how do you really facilitate a sense of identity? And particularly, I'm going back to the issue, and this actually was one of the questions, is how particularly can Black, Indigenous, and people of color address ideas around imposter syndrome. And I think really kind of focusing again on these places that one feels valued and having a positive sense of racial identity. Okay, couple questions in the chat. I'm just looking at the time. checking on the time. We got a few minutes left.
One person said the thought of grad school is intimidating and I felt I wasn't smart enough. I found an area of research and good mentors that have helped relieve that intimidation and I feel a sense of belonging.
Awesome. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for that comment.
And another person said, as a person with a physical disability in STEM, it's a challenge wanting to do field work or lab work that are limiting in certain capacities and figuring out how to approach expressing my needs and adaptations or accommodations that I need in order to succeed. I hope to see improvements in the future.
Yes. And I will say that that's a challenge. Before I served in this role, I was the director of the Master of Social Work program, and we really had to spend a lot of time thinking through, like, how do we accommodate folks with various levels of ability. So I would definitely make sure that you seek kind of individuals, mentors who are able to advocate for you. And then also kind of connect with the Center for Disability Access. And they should also be able to provide assistance around how internships can modify things to ensure that you're accommodated so that your needs are met and then you're able to have a good learning experience. So a lot of times faculty don't even know that CDA can also provide support for research experiences as well as internships that are off campus in terms of ensuring that they're being accommodating in terms of your needs as well. So I hope that was helpful. But if there are other questions that you have, I'm going to put my email at the end. So like, feel free to reach out to me as well. And I'm happy to listen or connect with some other resources as well. Very important point. Thank you.
Looks like we don't have any questions right now.
Okay, fantastic. So another thing, I'm going back to this, is like, please enjoy the journey. And I wish I could go back and tell my younger self to enjoy the journey, because I spent so much time. I remember when I was transitioning from undergrad to grad school and I was applying to my first grad program, like how stressed out I was. And I remember like one day my mom, we were having lunch or something, and she was just like casually, "How's it going?" And I just like burst out into tears. And I just remember being so incredibly stressed out. And I wish someone had talked to me about wellness and ensuring that you have a wellness routine and just about enjoying the journey and understanding that in life, everything will not turn out exactly as you plan. So if, say, for example, you may have to delay from this year to next year, like, it's going to be okay. Really consider ways that you can prioritize your health and well-being and take care of yourself. One of the things, and I actually do have some links in here, one of the great recommendations I have, and again, I'm a social worker, is to develop a personal retreat day. So I actually have a resource in here that like helps you develop an agenda of what a personal retreat day could look like. It could look like going for a swim or for a run, or having a massage, or just going for a walk, journaling, like relaxing, like binging some Netflix, like whatever you would consider super relaxing and an amazing day. So I really do suggest that you incorporate these things regularly into your schedule and into your time. Any comments about that, or things that folks would like to share about what they do to prioritize their well-being and self-care?
We do have one question.
Sure.
Somebody says, as a former student that has been away from school for a few years, would you advise that I start this process with the same steps you've outlined here, or would you suggest a different starting point?
I actually feel like these steps could be applicable to anybody. I really would suggest trying to start that process close to a year in advance. And those SMART goals is a great way to kind of outline that process with just thinking about, where do I start? What is my goal? And having sort of a date in mind and specific a program that you really are interested in, and then kind of going again through that process with doing your research, with applying to programs, thinking through where you want to go, looking at deadlines. And again, I would assume that if you're out of school, you probably have a lot of other commitments, like, potentially family commitments, work commitments, lots of other things going on. So thinking about, like, how do you kind of manage your time in a way that is helpful to you, but you're able to kind of achieve those goals in preparing for graduate school.
We have a comment that says work-life balance is so important. I used to bend over backwards to impress and ensure being successful, but I realized that the breaks I took were more important than the overdrive I was putting myself in, because otherwise I would just drain my energy and not perform as well if I took time for myself.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. What a wonderful comment. Appreciate that. Thank you so much, everybody, also for all your comments and questions. I think it's really made it very interactive. Next slide. So these are just some resources that I kind of put together. And again, you'll have access to this. This is actually the SMART goal worksheet. You may remember I started out with the SMART goals in those processes. 7 critical steps to finding the right grad school. It's just a short little article. This is the link to the website here at the graduate school at the University of Utah. So many of those fellowship opportunities that I mentioned are there. Also the GradCast, which again has some disciplines. It's not obviously as comprehensive as the Common App, but there are some common disciplines and programs that you can potentially look at with GradCast. And then here's just a list of the 2023 best graduate schools. And this is also the self-care planning guide that I mentioned that has the agenda for the development of a self-care retreat. So I think this question might be for you, Shelley. Will they receive these slides via email, or will they be on the website?
I will have them on the website this afternoon, and I will give you a link here shortly.
Awesome, thank you. Next slide. I think we're almost at the end. Okay, and these are just references, and I think this is my email. So always please feel free to reach out to me if you have questions or comments. I'm here at the U, and I would love to interact with anyone who has questions, or if there are ways that I can support you. Okay, and I think we have the event eval. So while we have that, it's just about 2. Maybe we can take another question or comment. Any other questions or comments before we conclude?
One person said, "Thank you so much, Tiffany. This was very helpful. I graduated in 2020, and I'm trying to figure out grad school as a non-traditional first-generation graduate."
Okay, and I see Matthew has his hand raised.
Yeah, I was just going to say one last comment was there was quite a while where I struggled to imagine how I might fit in or belong in a graduate setting. And I found some success stories of other neurodivergent people. And you mentioned how, people from diverse backgrounds don't make it to positions of power. And this is furthered by the fact that those successes are shared less. And that if you're struggling to feel like you fit in, it can be incredibly powerful to actively look for success stories of people like you. And it can, I don't know,
Thank you for sharing that. That was really amazing. I've been talking about that a lot, Matthew, so that really means a lot to me personally. Thank you. Well, I see we're right at the bewitching hour. So I just want to say thank you to all of you for just a wonderful hour and a magnificent time and all the questions and comments. I really enjoyed meeting and interacting with you, and you have my email address. So please feel free to reach out if there's anything that I can do to help you in your journey. And thank you so, so much for coming today. I'll turn it back over to you, Shelley.
Thank you, Dr. Baffour. We really appreciate this. This has been an amazing presentation. I just want to remind everyone about the evaluation form. I just put the link in the chat, and there's a QR code too. And I also put a link in where I'll have the slides. I'd say within the hour, I'll have those available for you. And if you have any questions for our office, the Office of Undergraduate Research, we're at our.utah.edu. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.